Hello again. So now we're on the second part of this module. So you've now done module number one, and let me take the video off. You've done module number one, you've watched the video, you've read chapter 4 of the trainer book, and then you wrote in the journal how can you use the trainer chapters 1, 2, and 4 to guide your approach with transition. And you earned 3 out of the 10 points for this module. But really what I'm looking for is for you to really bring in the research that she talks about, the culturally responsive practices that she talks about, and bring that into your writing. So, all right, let's move on. So the next piece is around, being culturally responsive. So I have done some focus groups around these different questions that I'm going to go over. And one of them is, how do you ensure your stakeholders have a culturally responsive experience during transition? And my focus groups actually fell right in line with the research. So one is that you need trainings and knowledge provided about culturally and linguistically diverse community members. So this includes the school staff who understands the needs and develops empathy for the diverse groups that they're working with. Community-based learning opportunities, so partnerships with communities to discuss the value systems. And so this could be reaching out to the local rec center or even the employment support center or something like that, or a job placement agency, to really kind of talk about like your students, your families, and how you're supporting the needs that they have within the community. And this is a big part around, I've talked to you guys about the culturally responsive, not necessarily following the Eurocentric views that we often have in education. Providing parents with transition workshops to connect them with resources, but also to educate them on what services and rights they have around transition. Having former students come and speak on a panel of telling them about like, hey, this is after I graduated, this was the experience I had. And then also inviting outside agencies to your school campus to meet not only your students, but also share the resources that they have and start those connections early. Making sure that you have translators and translated documents. And then having an informal pre-meeting with students to discuss the meeting agenda and even allow them to decide or have some input on who's invited to the team meetings or the IEP meetings or the transition meetings. Here's another slide from somebody's student presentation that you can go ahead and take a look at. You can see this was a Spanish speaker, and also the disability is actually described. So it's a specific learning disability, which means, and then have the student be able to explain their disability. It is far too common that students with disabilities actually say things like, oh, I don't have a disability, or they don't actually know what it means. And so it's our job to really work with them to make sure that they are familiar with what it is that their label is, but also what that means for them. Because it can also take some of the power off of the label if you actually know the reasoning or the meaning behind that as well. All right, so how can we prepare our educators? So of course, training pre-service teachers on ADA, WIOA, the VR agencies, the adult services, the regional center, the Department of Rehab, and other post-secondary outcomes. So if you're not familiar with any of those, so that you can feel free to work with me. I'm assuming that you guys have some background on that from your courses before. Explicitly teaching self-determination skills to students early, that means elementary. Integrating transition skills into all classes, including the general ed, and including various groups and resources into the school community and into the curriculum. So for example, migrant education, foster programs, wraparound programs, crisis workers, mental health specialists, whoever it is that you can get in, have them come and talk to the students and talk to your staff about what types of supports that they could have. And then also tell success stories and show how students can actually get there, make this come alive and with stories. Create family councils to include the priorities and needs of the student and the families. So actually bringing other families together so that they can support each other through this whole um, uh, um, understanding of what transition is really about. And then also if educators attend conferences and professional development opportunities, then they will continue to grow as lifelong learners. So here's another slide, and it's I can do it. And not having the toys I like or being able to run all around the classroom makes that person angry. And how do they calm themselves down? They calm themselves down by going out to recess and playing outside, being able to run. I need to use my words when I need something. And so this was a slide that was more from the functional level or elementary level. And the next one is how can we include all stakeholders in the process? We know that we build capacity when we have relationships with others. And so if the parents are trusting you, if the outside resources and agencies are trusting you, if the community-based organizations are wanting to come in and work with you, then there's a lot more opportunities for growth. Ensuring that we have clear, consistent, transparent communication, that we are teaching also our students to be respectful and advocate for themselves in a socially appropriate manner. One way to do this is to provide surveys. I know that those are boring oftentimes, but it does allow you to learn more about a lot of different stakeholders and what their desires are and how they plan on or are able to support the student in their transition. Making sure you have translators, planning ahead so that everyone can make it, especially some of the people from outside agencies. They have a very hard time taking off any time for work to get to a meeting. And so, one thing you can have them do is maybe Zoom in or conference call in and, trying to make it so that everybody can get on the same page and learn about each other is important, but the further you plan ahead, the better. One big thing that continues to come up is administrative support around transition. And so making sure that your administrator knows what you're doing and supports you and gives you the resources you need to make a difference in your students' lives. Creating these systems. So one of the things that I did at the high school I worked at was I planned an annual college and career fair. And what I realized really quickly was that that was a lot to do in one day. So then I changed it to a college fair in the fall and then a career fair in the spring. And then I also worked with a lot of my colleagues in making sure that the day was a success by bringing in more than just my resources, but people from all sorts of different jobs and universities and programs and whatnot to come and speak and support the students. And then the last one is starting early. So as you notice, we have a functional and we have an elementary version of this project that we'll be doing. And, I can't emphasize enough the importance of making sure that you really do start transition early. Here's another slide. This is from the high school, the secondary level one. And who I am influences who I'll be. And they went through and talked about their culture, their family, their disability. And I love according to the student's IEP or my IEP, what does it say and then what does it mean? And I thought that was nicely done. All right, and then the last one, we're kind of cutting off the top of this, but how can we build curriculum and conversations to encourage stakeholders to begin the conversation about transition earlier? And in Kansas, they actually have the transition starting in the 8th grade. Meeting with the parents at the early childhood through graduation to talk about this outside of IEP meetings, so not trying to throw everything into an IEP meeting. Notifying the stakeholders, emphasizing that early education and IEP decisions impact graduation and post-secondary outcomes. Educating students earlier regarding disability and what that means for them as individuals, and also helping them, as we talked about do you have a disability? And a lot of them say, no, I don't. Really helping them destigmatize learning differences or abilities or whatever we want to call it. And so really kind of breaking down what it means for the students. So, all right, we're going to jump into the transition resource kits and the Zaro Center next.